Entering the Mayo Experience.
Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Mayo Experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience. Let's talk some football today. We're talking running back rankings for the 2019 fantasy football season, PPR rankings, and we might not get everyone in order correctly, and it's always subject to change. We're still currently in June, at the very beginning of June. I'll have my full top 200 out, around America Day, July 4th, over that sort of weekend. So I got like a month to tinker, but I want to get at least a preliminary ranking down. I want to get the tiers correct, so then I can start working within those tiers to rank the people properly. I'll probably try to take at least preseason rankings a little bit more serious this year, rather than just having the usual terrible rankings. So I have a good guest on the line who is great at ranking, so that's really going to help. And I've already separated them into tiers a little bit, and I want to talk this through to get the full list up and going, at least now, so you can start working off of that and change whatever you kind of want. But here are a few things you can do if you want to get into a draw for 20 DK dollars. Number one, smash the like button for the episode, leave your DraftKings handle in the comment section, and rank, for PPR purposes, for this season only, your top 5 running backs. That's way number one. Way number two to do so, you can go to my iTunes page, my Stitcher page, Spotify, Podbean, doesn't matter what it is. Subscribe to the Pat Mayo Experience audio podcast, rate and review 5 stars, leave your DraftKings handle in the comment section, say something nice about the show. That's another way to do it. The other way, the third way to do it, follow me on Instagram at the PME. You will see a post about this show and running back rankings. All you need to do is heart that pick. Just leave your DraftKings handle in the comment section. Boom. Follow, like, comment. Takes like 10 seconds, you could win 20 DK bucks. That's the way we go about it over here at the Pat Mayo Experience and over at DraftKings. But I want to bring in from The Athletic, one of the premier rankers on the planet as it pertains to not only fantasy baseball rankings, but fantasy football rankings especially. It's the All-In Kid. It's Jake Ciely. What's up?
What's up? At first, I thought you said heart that bit instead of pick. Like you're like going back like high school.
You can heart that bit? What's a bit?
Like that's like short slang for bitch.
Oh, see, I did not realize that. I mean, I feel like the word bitch is not something that needs to be shortened.
It is when you went to private school.
I guess so. I mean, I'll fancy Jake going to. I'm a product, as many people know by the way that I write, the productivity of me just in general, the accuracy of my rankings. That I am public school through and through. Like I didn't get the best education. I'm not going to lie to you. Even my college was pretty substandard.
That's fair. Hey, speaking of Instagram, you're not the one that accidentally got my Instagram story, are you?
Maybe. I feel like I didn't get it. No. I think you just sent that to a random person.
So some random person, I still don't know who it is. I accidentally sent an Instagram story to somebody.
That sucks. I mean, we're old. We're bad at Instagram. We're trying, though. So give Jake a follow, too, at AllInKidMe at the PME. We'll be good to go. Let's talk running backs. That's why we're here. We'll just jump right into it. Tier 1 of running backs that I have 4 guys for PPR, and it is Saquon Barkley. I have it written down Christina McCaffrey, but I believe that is Christian McCaffrey, Ezekiel Elliott, and Alvin Kamara. So I guess the two things to really kind of parse out here among these top guys is McCaffrey. Ron Rivera has come out and said that his touches could be down this year. And if we had listened to him last year, we all just would have drafted Christian McCaffrey inside the top 3 when he said the touches were going up. With a banged up Cam Newton, do you really see the touches going down for Christian McCaffrey?
No, if anything, maybe like 5%. And if that's the case, so what? Maybe he doesn't get 100 receptions. Maybe he only gets 90. Whoop-de-doo. I don't see it being a significant point to knock him out of the top 4. And I like that. So as soon as you said I have a top tier and you said 4, I said, yep. I don't know if you heard that. I agree with you 100%. I think it's clear if you want a top 4 pick this year or just give me the back of the first round. I don't want to even pick 5th because you're the first person to have to make that decision. So I think that maybe he loses 10 to 15 touches over the entire year, still be a top 4.
So is Saquon number 1, or are we just banking on that he gets either the same or slightly better than he did a year ago? Because I think there's a very strong case that you can make for Ezekiel Elliott if he just improves in the touchdown department, especially on the ground. We just saw his reception totals go up so highly. I was way off on Zeke. I never thought the receptions would go up, and all of a sudden they more than double. If that's going to be the case, and that's going to be the new norm for Elliott, and that Dak's not going to steal all of his touchdowns this year, he could very well be the number 1 pick.
He certainly can. And it would be like the touchdown. It'd be the positive touchdown regression off the touches we saw from last year. But that's, we're trying to predict touchdowns, and that's always dangerous when you talk about fantasy. I'll say this. You can honestly make a case for all the top four. I'm going with Saquon Barkley. But let's be real. Like, if Alvin Kamara doesn't have can he really handle 280, 300 touches of the season and not get hurt? And he was going to see that volume like he saw last year for the first 4 games before Mark Ingram was back. Then he's in the content. He should be probably the number 1 running back. I mean, that's really what we're looking at here. So I think it just really comes down to what's your taste. Ezekiel Elliott's the safest. Christian McCaffrey with those little concerns. And if you look at the running backs they drafted too, with Jordan Scarlett and Elijah Holyfield, you worry a little bit about the receptions, as I mentioned. I'm not that worried about Elijah Holyfield. I was never a big fan of his, but you could poke holes in everybody here. But you're nitpicking. Like Saquon Barkley is, all right, how good is the Giants offense going to be? Ezekiel Elliott, I think what we get down to is he's by far the safest, because even if he only replicates last year, all right, so you got the number 3 running back.
He was thrown in cuffs in Vegas. I don't know. He wasn't arrested or charged or anything like that, but it feels like there's always just a lingering possibility. And we saw it that one season when he ended up getting suspended for, what week did that eventually happen? Was it like week 6 that happened?
I thought it was a little bit later than that. It was somewhere right around there for lifting up the lady shirt and all that stuff.
Yeah, so it feels like he is like out of the top 4 guys, if something off the field were to happen and he were just to go away, it seems like he would be the likeliest of these 4 candidates. That's really the only case I can really make against Ezekiel Elliott when it comes down to it. The Kamara case that I would make against him is that they bring in Latavius Murray to essentially just be Mark Ingram. Maybe you get an uptick in Kamara, but he doesn't dominate the backfield playing 90% of the snaps. He plays 75% of the snaps, which would still have him be top 4 for me, especially in PPR. But what if we get into a situation where, we're inside the 5-yard line now, Latavius Murray comes in, and all of a sudden you see Alvin Kamara, who ended up with 14 touchdowns last season. And if that's not going to be the 14 touchdowns on the ground, if that comes back down a little bit, like he only gets like 8, or he has like, God forbid, 6 on the ground like Ezekiel Elliott did, then a lot of his upside is kind of taken out. You're there for the receptions, and I doubt they'll ever throw to Latavius Murray, but should I be sweating Latavius Murray? I guess that's my only concern.
I think you have to mildly sweat him. I think if you look at the usage from when the down weeks of Mark Ingram, when the usage wasn't in that kind of like the 60-40 split and kind of more of he got pushed to the side and he was in for the short yards, the bigger runs that they need the back for. I think that's what we see Latavius Murray. I wouldn't expect Latavius Murray to be 100% what they had Mark Ingram. But that's it. If that happened, would that surprise me? No. And you just poked all the holes there. And that's why if you're still playing in any leagues that are full non-PPR, I think Kamara falls out of that tier 1. I think it's the other 3, and he's kind of on an island by himself. But in full point PPR, I'm still not that concerned. All I'm saying is I'm with you. I'm not taking Kamara first. I'm not taking Christian McCaffrey first. It's down to Ezekiel Elliott or Saquon Barkley. And if you wanted to go with either one, and again, if you wanted to take one of the other 2, I'm not going to say you're crazy to do so, is basically my point.
Well, as it pertains to Barkley, like you could see an upswing in the amount of rushes that he ended up with this season. He only had 261, and it kind of seems strange that's all he ended up with on the ground. Now, obviously, he was a focal point of the passing game, like sometimes seeing well into the double digits in terms of targets, but 15 total touchdowns in a bad offense. Like, I'm not worried about this offense being bad and it affecting Saquon Barkley at all, because he played in just as crappy of an offense last year, and it didn't matter.
Yeah, well, but at the same time, you looked at last year, and I think that's the best of what you're hoping for this year, because you look at some of the numbers after Odell Beckham got hurt, not quite as pretty at times. So we're going to have an offensive passing game led by Sterling Shepard and Golden Tate. And obviously, Saquon Barkley is going to be a huge part of that. I just worry about it. Just really comes down to the touchdowns. And again, I just said that I don't like predicting. Nobody does. But at the same time, if you're going to give me Ezekiel Elliott or Saquon Barkley, who's going to score more, and you gave me odds in Vegas, I'm taking Ezekiel Elliott. If you gave me the same thing, I would still take more touchdowns for Kamara, even though the fact that he did have a nice season last year, it's still this offense. I mean, it's going to be Daniel Jones potentially week 1, and if not, it's Eli Manning. And how excited are you about the offense moving down the field with regularity, with Saquon Barkley even at the helm, quote unquote, because he is the lead of that offense. So it's just, he's, like I said, he's in the conversation for the number 1. If you want to poke holes, you can.
Well, you got to, I mean, if we're going to like nitpick here, if you end up with the number 1 pick and you have to decide who you're going to take, like, I think that the tier is the same with these 4 people, but I think that Kamara is probably definitely 4th and the other 3 are a bit above. Like, can you see Christian McCaffrey replicating what he did on the ground in terms of touchdowns next season?
It definitely can. And it's nothing to do with like the pictures of showing him get all jacked up this all season. It's just the truth of what it was going into last year is Christian McCaffrey, even looking back at college, yes, that system helps running backs, but at the same time, that system was also using him running between the tackles plenty enough. And like he can handle that. And like, I think all those concerns are gone. And I think if you look at the way that he worked out this offseason, he's planning to take some more of those hits. So I'm not concerned about Christian McCaffrey. If I'm there at number 3, I'm taking Christian McCaffrey every single time because I eliminate that risk of Kamara.
If it's not PPR, would you drop Christian McCaffrey down versus these other two?
No, I would still. Christian McCaffrey would be 3rd. It would be and it would just be, I want to have the conversation of Christian McCaffrey being 1 or 2. Like, so in a full point PPR, any of the 3, if you want to take McCaffrey, I still want to do it. For me, I'm going Barkley because I see a higher ceiling, even though I still think Ezekiel could get more touchdowns. To your point about the few touches that Barkley had last year, there's a ceiling where he puts up a Todd Gurley like year. So I think that's why I would go with Barkley. I might do 30% of my leagues take Zeke just to diversify, but that's my order. It's always going to be McCaffrey 3. It's always going to be Kamara 4 for me in non-half full point PPR.
So I guess the big question with Zeke as the number 1 pick is, even, let's say, what are the chances that he replicates the same sort of season through the air? Do you think that's something that's solidified in, or do you think that can come back like 20-25%?
I wouldn't say that much. I would say if it comes back, I'd probably say 10-15%. It's only because of the development of Gallup, a full year of really Dak and Cooper working together. I think that's where you might just see a little bit of a drop off just because they don't need him as much. But I still think you look at how effective he was and how dangerous he was as a pass catcher, and why would you want to go away from that? Why would you want to go away from that dynamic piece of your offense? So again, maybe 10 to 50. I would say, if you told me 20-25%, that would surprise me if you fell off that much.
All right. So what's more likely then? The downturn of receptions and targets for Ezekiel Elliott versus him going up in the rushing touchdown department, where he only had 6 last year.
If you tell me which one's more likely, I'd say the up in the touchdown department.
Yeah, I think if that's the case, that makes Zeke the number 1 pick. If he can get to double-digit touchdowns on the ground, or just even increase his overall touchdown total, then that was the big gap between him and the other 2 last year.
Yeah, but Saquon Barkley was right on Todd Gurley's heels. So if he goes up as well, so I guess the real point is, do you think Saquon Barkley is going to be the same with more touches and maybe becomes less efficient because of the offense? I think it's just going to come down to personal taste there.
I guess so. And I don't even know if Barkley can replicate what he did through the air last year, like over 90 receptions. Is that how they actually want to use him?
You have to use him like that. You better use him like that after you spent the draft capital and gutted this team to make him the focal point of the offense.
So I guess that's like the coin flip you got to talk yourself into. Is it Barkley or Zeke at 1 or 2, then McCaffrey, then Kamara? That's the way I'm gonna lean Zeke right now, and I'm gonna hear some cases over the course of the next month, and maybe I'll rearrange that when I release my final rankings.
And don't discount what the Giants did with that offensive line. And they made some big strides in improving that, between the trade that they made with the Browns to bring in Zeitler, or however you pronounce his name, to that piece, to the fact that you got another year of them gelling on the left side with Solder, who played better in the second half, was still a disappointment contract-wise. But then you have the pieces coming back healthy this year, and a second year from the rookie from last season. So you put all those together, and really the only question right now is right tackle.
Well, if you improve the offensive line, at least as it pertains to Saquon Barkley, that would probably see his rushing total go up. Like, he had 261 carries last year. Maybe he verges on 300. Maybe that takes away from what he would do in the passing game. Maybe he doesn't see 121 targets. Maybe he sees like 98. And I would take the receptions over the rushing any day of the week.
Oh, I could definitely see that. But I think we'll put it this way. No matter what way you cut it, last year he had 350 touches. I'd say 350 touches is his floor this year. He's going, unless he gets hurt. I mean, he's going to get fed the ball time and time again.
All right. Well, you hit on one of the key names, and he's the toughest guy to put into these rankings. It's Todd Gurley. Like, if we're talking about a top 4 running back, and we're not talking about the guy who just dominated last season until the very end, and then things got a bit dicey. Like, we don't really know what's going on with Gurley right now. Like, is this, chronic knee problem a real thing, or are they just kind of creating fake news out there? And is like in the early drafts that he's done, like he's going in the second round, isn't he?
So far, and I've seen him. It's the end of the first round if he makes it into the first round.
Like that, it seems low, but at the same time, you're real like everything in the first round. Like the reason that these four guys are sort of on a tier by themselves, and we'll talk about tier 2 in a second. There's a lot of safe guys in tier 2. Anyone can get injured at any time, but actively targeting a guy whose injury status you don't know about with a first round pick does seem incredibly dicey. But this could also be the league winner for you too. If you're sitting at pick 13 of a 14-man league and Gurley is sitting there, is he someone you would just roll the dice on and be like, if he's healthy, I'm going to win this league?
I would, but not till the second round. And
so no,
like,
the answer would be no in that circumstance.
That's what I was going to say is if I'm in most of my drafts so far, he's not making it because I would take him the second round with an early pick. And I'm not even talking on the turn. I'm probably missing him on the turn because I'm just going to take two people knowing that how long I have to wait in the third round. Well, you know what? All of what we're saying right now, this is why everybody should be playing auction. But at that point, if you're still in a snake draft, because it's still exceptionally popular, I'm just not going to do it until the middle of the second round. And at that point, as you just said, the answer is no, because he's not making it that far. There was one draft where he almost made it there. I think it was the third or the fourth pick of the second round. So he's almost there. And if people are using my rankings, he's probably going to make it there because I don't have him as an RB1. And it's not just because of the name. Like we're not fooling anybody. Nobody's out there not knowing the story with Todd Gurley. It's the draft capital that they spent Darrell Henderson. And that is the fact of exceptionally talented. And even if, like, let's go, there's two things that Sean McVay said here, and that's the concerning part is one is if you're a fan of Henderson like I am, you don't like that he said, we've been looking for a change of pace guy that we want to use. And I see Todd Gurley and Malcolm Brown as 3-down running backs. So he already kind of put Henderson in a position of like, this is how we're going to use him. On the flip side, that's also kind of a little bit damning for me for Todd Gurley, because that's telling me even if he's healthy, we probably don't want him touching the ball like he was last year because of that knee. And maybe Henderson sees 30, 40% every single week anyway. Like this turns into Todd Gurley is Alvin Kamara and Darrell Henderson is Mark Ingram, with obviously their talent roles reversed, but somebody that we see touching the ball every single week. And now Todd Gurley's in that 15 to 20 touch range.
So it sounds very clear like he's going to be a part of this tier 2 range. I have a very big tier 2 when it comes to these running backs with different degrees of safety, but guys that I think could garner 75% or more of the running back touches on their respective teams. Whether it turns out that way, I don't know, but that's the way that I'm seeing it right now. So tier 2 involves Melvin Gordon, David Johnson, Le'Veon Bell, James Conner, Joe Mixon, Dalvin Cook, Nick Chubb, and Marlon Mack. Just because I don't think it's Spencer Ware or Jordan Wilkins or Naheem Hines. Maybe Hines, if they get down in games, could start playing a lot of snaps. But whenever Marlon Mack was healthy, Marlon Mack was the running back in the Colts backfield. Is Todd Gurley a part of that mix somewhere?
Todd Gurley, for me, like I'm looking right now, he basically finishes off that. And he's the last person I would put in my giant tier. I have how many guys did you name? Because I have 8.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then there's Gurley. But then there's other guys like I didn't name Fournette. I didn't name Aaron Jones, Damian Williams, Josh Jacobs, Devonta Freeman. I have them on the next tier down.
Yeah, yours are, there's a few, I think there's only like 2 or 3 that were different, but the point being, I'm with you in the fact that I would put him in the second tier, but he's at the lower end of the tier for me.
All right, well, let's talk through these guys in tier 2 first. Maybe I need to drop people out of tier 2. This is why you're here, to talk me out of my nonsense, Jake, to come up with the correct answer so I can just copy your work and be like, oh yeah, see, I thought this all along. Melvin Gordon, do we worry about an Austin Eckler split at all?
No. I don't think so. The only thing you worry about Melvin Gordon is one healthy season to his career.
But it feels like you can piece that together. Like if he only plays 14 games, even again this year, I don't think I'm too concerned about that. Hopefully they don't hit it like the absolute wrong time. And maybe you end up taking like an L on a week because he gets hurt within the first quarter and then you're kind of screwed. You hope it's not significant, but what he produces on a week-to-week basis, I think of anyone in this tier, he's probably number 5 overall in terms of running backs. And I like David Johnson. I like James Conner. I like Le'Veon Bell, but I don't exactly know what it looks like for them, where they're at. At least I know what Melvin Gordon's going to put up if he is healthy. And I'm already factoring in that he misses 2 games.
Yeah, so I actually have Le'Veon Bell 5th, and then I have Melvin Gordon 6th. And if you want to put him 5 and 6 and reverse it because of that, because we don't know what the Jets offense is going to be, or is Le'Veon Bell going to touch the ball 20 times a game or not, even though, Adam Gase has already come out and said all these trades are ludicrous, the rumors. The fact is they spent to bring him in there, and they're going to use him. And they're going to, you can't ignore what Le'Veon Bell's done with the Pittsburgh Steelers offense, but I say Pittsburgh Steelers offense because it's the Steelers offense versus the Jets offense. So I'm going with Le'Veon Bell. if you want to take Gordon, you just have to have running back depth. If I'm drafting Gordon, my second running back isn't going to be a risky person. Like if Leonard Fournette or Devontae Freeman falls to me, I'm not taking either one of them to pair with Gordon. And I'm also going to make sure I have at least 2 or 3 guys on my bench of quality depth, not just like flyers. And that's just what you have to do. That's the same thing as if Fournette was my first running back, because maybe I go wide receiver to start. I'm just going to build my team differently. So it comes down to how do you want to roster construct here? That's really what the question is.
All right. Well, if we talk about like Jets offense versus Steelers offense as it pertains to Le'Veon Bell, are we really sweating Jalen Samuels that much for James Conner? Because until Conner got hurt, there was no Jalen Samuels.
Yeah, but it's different for this year, and it's different from what we saw from the usage. We're sweating him enough that I would say, look, it's not going to be Le'Veon Bell treatment where he's on the field 90% of the time. And that's what made Le'Veon Bell so attractive, on top of the fact that he is a great pass catcher and in a great offense. It was the fact that the guy never came off the field. Like, that's not going to be James Conner, partly because Jalen Samuels is a better pass catcher, but also because I think that the Steelers offense is just different without Le'Veon Bell. So I think we're looking at close to 70%, probably like 65-ish if I had to guess off the top of my head, or like if you gave me a number at the end of the year. So that's what I would be saying. But the majority of what's left over is going to go with Jalen Samuels. Benny Snell is not a very good running back. I like the Emery Hunt over at The Athletic and myself both. He's Jordan Howard. He doesn't do anything special. He's basically the backup if James Conner gets hurt, because he would step into that role. Jalen Samuels is just going to probably absorb about 30%, 25-30% a week.
It feels like that's really high. Like I would probably pencil in Conner for like 80% of the touches.
Nah, I would take that bet right now against you. You got to remember, even 30% for the backup option is not that high. Like the number of running backs, like Le'Veon Bell was the anomaly. There's like nobody that stays on the field 90% of the time. I saw like now Saquon Barkley and Todd Gurley before he got his hurt. And the majority of the time, you see the peak guys, like the top 5, you know this, you've seen the numbers, are usually between 75 and 85%. And then everybody from like 5 to 15 is in the more of like 60 to 65% range.
Well, yeah. So we need to try to parse it out 2 ways. Obviously, the guys at a part of tier 1 are there because of their usage rates plus their skill. Like these guys are all incredibly skilled. Now we just need to figure out the usage rate. Like even going back to Melvin Gordon, that even because we've just seen this over the past 2 years, that even if his shares are a bit down and he's like 65-35 with either Eckler or Jackson, whoever it might be, that when he's on the field that they use him. So his touches per snap are incredibly high to some people who play like 65% of the snaps, yet they're not touching the ball a bunch.
Right. And I think that's, you got to look at it too, is you could go back to, here's a good example, as we always talk about why the offense for Doug Peterson is so frustrating. And you say like, what is 60% of the snaps versus 60% of the touches? Because that was one of the things people always pointed out, is Darren Sproles was the only person to do both. But there's a big difference between, well, if you're on the field for 60%, does that actually equate to touches? And all that being said, I still say that James Conner isn't going to be the Le'Veon Bell for this team, because he's not Le'Veon Bell. And part of what he is not in that passing game, that same effectiveness. Jalen Samuels, you give these running backs side by side in the passing game, I'm going to take Jalen Samuels. That being said, he's not the running back that James Conner is. But I just think that I think this is a new look Steelers. It's not going to be greatly different, but I just think that's the difference here.
So you just think that there's more safety with Le'Veon Bell versus James Conner in the amount of snaps he's going to play and his role both on the goal line, in the backfield, and out of the backfield as a receiver?
I say yes, but I'll also remember who the head coach / right now GM is.
There we go.
It's Adam Gase. I mean, that's the truth. It's like, I can say that. This is the same guy, and I said that he's already said these rumors of being traded, like trading Le'Veon Bell, are stupid. This is the same guy who said, oh, we're not going to trade Jarvis Landry or back with the Dolphins. So, I mean, let's be honest here. I don't think you don't spend that kind of money and all that dead cap they're going to get right off the top just to trade Le'Veon Bell now. But if he gave him the Kenyon Drake treatment, would that really surprise anybody?
Well, at some point, Le'Veon Bell has to go record another rap album too. I think that's why he ended up not coming back last year. He had to throw some good diss tracks out there and be mocked for his terrible rapping. So he needs a rebound from that at some point during the season. Might need a bye week or two. Like he comes off the bye, he's like, I got another recording session this week. I'm going to skip this one. But
recording session. You hang out. You're up there with Drake. You can send him his way.
Yeah, I mean, Drake and I are hanging out. He's at the restaurant next door right now.
He's going to come over and massage your shoulders.
Hopefully, I'm all for that. Who doesn't love a good neck rub? I don't care who's giving it to me. It just feels great. David Johnson, With
Mhm.
Kyler Murray in the backfield, there's been a lot of different speculations. You can go one of two ways on this. Like, as a part of an air raid offense, which is expected what they're going to install in Arizona, you're taking more shots down the field, you're running at a shotgun more. I guess the case could be made that you're throwing the ball more vertically downfield, and that's not great for David Johnson unless he's lining up as a receiver and actually going and running routes, which is definitely possible. We've seen it before. We saw it under Bruce Arians, but maybe he's not getting those dump offs out of the backfield, which really solidified his floor in a bad offense. But you could go to the other side and say, hey, if they're just going to be passing 80% of the time, that the running lanes for David Johnson, despite not having a good offensive line, are just going to be so massive that he could average like 5-6 yards per carry, even if the numbers are down. Like, let's say he's not averaging 17 rushes a game, he's averaging 11 rushes a game, but still putting up like 60, 70 rushing yards, gets all the goal line work. There's a lot of cases that you can make with David Johnson. I just worry that this offense isn't very good.
And that's part of my concern. Look, before the drafting of Kyler Murray, even though we all expected it to happen, I was super excited for David Johnson this year because it's like, hey, as bad as last year was, as bad as this offense insisted on trying to run him up the middle, and that's not how you use David Johnson. That's not how you should use most running backs, let alone David Johnson. You saw when they used him in space, and then for whatever reason, they went right back to it all over again. The excitement was, okay, as bad as it was, he was still a top 10 running back. So if we can get an offense that makes more sense this year, let's go for it. You mentioned all the reasons we talked about on the other show. The Kyler Murray thing is just, look, I can't tell you exactly what's going to happen. I would love to. I love to sit here and be able to say, I know for a fact, blank. But the truth is David Johnson has a litany of outcomes for this season. The fact is, as you mentioned, Kyler Murray could open running lanes. Kyler Murray running could also pull back the reception numbers because he's not throwing the ball as much because he takes off running himself. Or maybe he's looking to get the ball out quickly and some of those screens out there, like if he's running arrows instead of screens and stuff like he just doesn't have time for David Johnson to get open. He's looking to his first read and throwing the ball. So there's a lot of ways you can look at it. I think all of them, if you say like the ups and downs and the goods and the bad, like you balance them all out, is David Johnson should have a better year than he did last year. And for that reason, I have no problem taking him as a top 8 running back. I'll probably take him as a top 8 running back. I mentioned to you the other day that we had a non-PPR draft, non-PPR draft where the first 6 or 7 picks were running backs. And a PPR draft, it was the first 9, including David Johnson. So we know what he wants to do, as he mentioned with the 1,000. And I think, it's reasonable to say that he's top 8. I think the 1,000 is a little ludicrous.
Well, as we know right now with Todd Gurley, he's incredibly risky based on the information that we have, and maybe we hear more throughout the course of training camp and into the preseason. It's not that big of a deal, and we know what his role is going to be. At least we have an idea. Like, I still have a tough time taking David Johnson over Todd Gurley, to tell you the truth, because I know the upside with David Johnson is one thing in this offense, but I know what Todd Gurley's is, and Todd Gurley's is the best fantasy running back. I don't think those days are still there for David Johnson.
I think that top 5 is there. It wouldn't surprise me if David Johnson was top 5.
Listen, it wouldn't surprise me if he was top 5, if he was number 5. If you told me he was number 1, I would be blown away.
I don't think I would be. And if Kyler Murray steps in and is Kyler Murray anything of what we saw in college from day one, and this offense starts clicking, here's the thing too, is like, what is the offense going to be? Well, we'll find out very quickly because the offense is going to be on the field a hell of a lot because this defense was already miserable. And now Patrick Peterson is suspended for the first 6 games. It was a 4 or 6. Yeah, whatever it be.
It's
6.
It's 6 right now. I mean, I'm sure he's going to appeal and get it beaten down.
What, to 5?
Yeah, sure. Not 6.
Point being, this defense is miserable to begin with, and then they lost Patrick Peterson for the first. So we're going to see. I wouldn't be surprised if you have the you have the combination of Kingsbury's offense, you have the combination of Kyler Murray now there, and the defense just going to, it's not going to be even the defense of like, well, then the offense is never going to be on the field. No, the defense is going to give up some pretty quick scores because they're just not going to be stopping people. So they're going to have to pass plenty. And that's actually a little bit why I think David Johnson's fine anyway, because they're going to be passing a lot. And the one good thing about David Johnson is in the passing game, he's up there with the rest of them. Before last year, he was one of, if not the best pass catching running back in the NFL when you talk about for fantasy purposes. So he still has that. He's still in the top 10 discussion for best pass catching running backs in the NFL. It's in the top 5 of pass catching. He should finish the year with 70, 80, 90 receptions wouldn't be out of the equation.
So the other guys that I had a part of this tier, like what do we do with Joe Mixon? Gio Bernard expected to be back, but Mixon was excellent last year. He was top 5 in the league in rushing yards, and he even got banged up at one point. He was involved in the receiving game. He's a talent that you loved coming out of college, and that really came to fruition last year. Like,
Yeah,
is he so immensely talented? Like, I would consider taking Mixon over David Johnson and Todd Gurley.
I have Joe Mixon over both of them. And
Okay.
it's
So
because Joe Mixon's a 3-down running back. And if you look at what they did, you said Giovanni Bernard, but if you look at what they did in the draft, they drafted Travion Williams and Rodney Anderson. And last year they drafted Mark Walton. What do all these 3 running backs have in common? They're Giovanni Bernard almost clones. They're looking for, I kind of feel like they're trying to find somebody to say like, all right, Gio, we're done with you. We found somebody where you can move on. We can let you go, free up that money and get you off the team, because it's not, they haven't drafted any running backs that are threats to Joe Mixon. Like, I go back to the Steelers. Benny Snell was drafted in case something happens to James Conner. All the drafts and all the Bengals moves are not as in Joe Mixon insurance. They're Giovanni Bernard insurance. And Giovanni Bernard last year, even when healthy, wasn't much of a factor because of how good Joe Mixon is as a 3-down running back. So I'm with you. He's inside my top 10. I'm taking Joe Mixon at 8 or 9, depending on how I feel. He's at 9 for me. I can see I'm taking him at 8 a couple times just to mix it up.
All right, so if we have these concerns about David Johnson potentially losing even touches to Kyler Murray in the rushing game, we don't know what to make of Todd Gurley. We have those other 4 now ahead of him, at least a part of this tier, the way that we're talking this through with Connor and Bell and Melvin Gordon. Should Dalvin Cook leap those guys too? Because at best, he's someone that legitimately could play 90% of the snaps.
Yes, I actually have Dalvin Cook ahead of all of them. I actually have Dalvin Cook at number 7, only behind Melvin Gordon and the rest of the ones we talked about. The truth is, Dalvin Cook finally got back to 100% later than we wanted, but late in the season. And once he was there, we saw what Dalvin Cook brought to the table before the injury, and we see what Dalvin Cook can bring to the table this year. And if this is another one. They let Latavius Murray walk, and they drafted Alexander Mattison, which is insurance. It's not somebody who's going to steal the passing game work for Dalvin Cook. It's not somebody who's a hammer, so they take Dalvin Cook off the field when they need the tough yards. They drafted Mattison, and this is a little bit different than the Gio comparison. They drafted somebody who could step in and take Dalvin Cook's role if he happens to get hurt again. That's the only concern with Dalvin Cook. He's similar to the Melvin Gordon. Is like this many injuries at this point, dating back to college. You have to be a little bit concerned if he's on your team, and this is where you draft running back depth. But if you're talking about what he should do talent-wise and the way that this offense kind of shifted in the second half of the season and became more run-heavy, I think Dalvin Cook, like I said, I have him at number 7. I think he's ahead of those other guys because I think him and Joe Mixon are actually very similar. I take him slightly ahead of the others just because I know he's staying on the field, unlike James Conner with the Jalen Samuels talk.
So what do we do then with like Nick Chubb and even Marlon Mack? I was very impressed with Marlon Mack, and I think it's a very easy offense to accumulate fantasy points out of the backfield from. And we saw the games like when they got ahead, they just turned around and you know what, Marlon Mack, you get every possible touch. It's when they fall behind way in games that Naheem Hines is on the field and he's picking up like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and even 10 targets at some point. But Marlon Mack kind of chipped away at that as a little bit of the season goes along. He's not going to be a dual threat guy like a lot of the people we talked about, but he could be close to like what James Conner is.
He could be close, but that concern of like how much is why I have him further down. Like Nick Chubb, to go back to the first part of it, I have Nick Chubb at number 10. I'm not concerned about the Kareem Hunt thing when he comes back. Kareem Hunt, when he does, the only way he cuts into Nick Chubb is if Nick Chubb is banged up or underperforming at that point, which the underperforming part I don't see happening. You talk about somebody else I was a big fan of. I'm going to throw out something that a lot of college people at the time said before Nick Chubb destroyed his knee in college. And I mean, he tore it 3 different ways. Before he did, people were saying, this kid might be better than Todd Gurley because you replaced him. And then everybody's looking at the comparisons like, wow, this kid is amazing. He's at least on Todd Gurley's tier, if not potentially better. Then he exploded his knee. He's finally getting back there last year. I doubt he ever gets back to 100%. And you watched him last year. As great as he was, it still wasn't quite the 100% explosiveness that we saw before the injury, but that's expected. Nick Chubb is going to dominate in this offense. Again, Kareem Hunt, for you, what you look at, you bring in here, Kareem Hunt was an insurance, and it was a free insurance pick. It's kind of like similar to what the Dolphins did when they traded for Rosen. It's like, it didn't cost us much. Worst case scenario, he ends up being a backup. Worst case, he never touches the field. Best case scenario, if something happens to Chubb, we have a replacement that's just like Chubb, and we've seen perform well. So that's why I have Chubb inside my top 10, just behind Mixon. And to be honest with you, the touches when he does come back is the only reason he doesn't rate higher, that being Chubb. With Marlon Mack, you mentioned it, and again, I'm going to go back to it, is he's in this whole group for me in the next tier. I have Leonard Fournette there, Derrick Henry there, Darius Geis coming off an injury, Mark Ingram. But the common thing from the other names outside of Geis is what you said. These are guys that if they're behind and passing a lot, probably are coming off the field a good amount. And I know the Colts are better. I know the Colts looked really good last year. Their defense still has some issues, and it would be a surprise to me. The downside with Marlon Mack is he only gets 10 touches in any given week.
Yeah, so and I guess the one thing that we saw with Nick Chubb last year too, towards the end of the season, was where he was just on the field so much. Once Cleveland got better, he backdoored his way into a few receptions, which no one really expected from him. And I don't know if that can continue. Like, the reception total for Marlon Mack is going to be down. That's why he appears either at the bottom of this year or he even gets bumped to the next year. With Chubb, like, what can we realistically expect in terms of a target total per game? And like, Duke Johnson has demanded a trade. They're probably not going to trade him, so they'll probably just try to run him into the ground and do whatever they need to do with him. But maybe he'll line up more as a receiver under Freddie Kitchens. I don't know. But like 4 targets a game, 4 to 6 targets a game, because if you told me it was 6 for Nick Chubb, that would bump him up above probably like David Johnson for me. I
think 5-ish is about
That's
right.
It
is pretty good. And to your point about the whole Duke Johnson situation, as I'm sitting here, I would say I don't expect the Browns to use him that much, because similar to Todd Gurley, to continue with that comparison, is why would you take Nick Chubb off the field? Because one is you don't give anything away by bringing in the sub package with Duke Johnson, or, hey, Duke Johnson barely ever runs between the tackles. He's in the passing game. So you don't give anything away. And then Nick Chubb is a very good receiver, similar to Todd Gurley, somebody that if you talked about swapping their positions and you put Chubb in the Rams offense where he doesn't have to deal with Odell Beckham and Jarvis Landry and Baker Mayfield and David Njoku, as good as the Rams offense is, I know they have 3 wide receivers, but I'm just saying we've seen Todd Gurley do it in that offense. We haven't seen people really do it in the Kitchens offense for a full season. I think Chubb with the Rams, if you told me he finished the season with 80 receptions, I think that's doable. Now, do I think the Browns do the same thing? Probably not. But if you told me 55 receptions, maybe 60 receptions for Nick Chubb, I think that's well within his ability and well within his range. The really thing that comes down to the Browns is, at what point have we maybe gone too far? Like, we have yet to see Freddie Kitchens, the head coach, like, to make that transition and moving this offense. Like, what if after 7 games, it's not even as good as Sean McVay and the rest of the NFL is like, oh, look, this is how you beat Freddie Kitchens. And all of a sudden this offense just bombs in the second half. Now, I don't believe it's going to happen. I'm just saying, before all these people are drafting Baker Mayfield in the top 5 and Nick Chubb is the 6th running back off the board and all that, like, there's downside here.
Yeah, like if you told me that you could pencil in Nick Chubb to 65 receptions or potentially 70 receptions, he would be a part of like the tier 1 discussion.
I don't think he's that far, but you're right.
But that elevates him up to the 5th overall running back or the 6th overall running back. So I'm looking at the tiers right now. Like, I think that's
his ceiling.
but I know I'm saying that's within his range of outcomes. But if you just told me that was going to happen, I would have no problem penciling him in like near Alvin Kamara. But I don't think that's going to happen. So if I think he gets like 45, where does that put him? Does that put him ahead of Todd Gurley and David Johnson?
Yes.
Does that put him ahead of, does that put him ahead of like Dalvin Cook and Joe Mixon?
No. I mean, I can tell you where I have him. I have Dalvin Cook, then Connor, then Mixon Chubb.
See, I think I have more faith in the role of James Conner than you do. I'm not convinced that Samuel is going to play 30% of the snaps, or at least we'll get some of the games where Conner plays like 90% and his downside floor in terms of snaps will be like 70%, with all pieces being equal and all pieces being healthy. So as a part of this tier 2, I'm going to bump Mac down to the next tier, maybe as the lead of the next tier. But I got Gordon, Bell, Conner. You talked me on Bell over Conner. Joe Mixon, Dalvin Cook, Nick Chubb, David Johnson, Todd Gurley. Does that make sense to you?
Yep.
Okay, so
you're missing 1 that I have. Actually, no, 2. You left 2 guys out.
All right, so as a part of tier 3 then, as we talk about it, we have Marlon Mack, Leonard Fournette, Aaron Jones, Damian Williams, Josh Jacobs, and Devonta Freeman. I don't have Sony Michel in this range. I don't have Derrick Henry in this range. I have them sort of off on their own little island because I don't want either of them, but especially in a PPR format. Not to say that they can't be good, but they'll be inconsistent, and they will have absolutely no floor, which is not what I'm looking for here. Maybe if they fall, you can take one, but I'm not actively targeting these guys. So who were the 2 that missed out? It was Fournette and Williams?
No. It wasn't Fournette. It was Williams and Josh Jacobs.
All right, so let's talk about Damian Williams to kick this off then. Should he be a part of this tier? You think he should be a part of tier 2?
Tier 2, not even a question.
How high then? Is he better than Nick Chubb?
No, he's right behind Nick Chubb.
So you would have him ahead of, in my rankings at least, I have Chubb then David Johnson. You would have him ahead of David Johnson?
No, I would put him behind David Johnson. But one spot. He'll be right behind David Johnson.
If we're going to project Damian Williams this highly, that he's a part of this tier, I think you have to put him ahead of David Johnson because you're either banking on him being the guy or not being the guy. And this is saying by putting him in this tier that he is the guy. And that's a far better spot to be in that Kansas City offense than it is being a part of the Arizona offense.
So that's why I say no, is because is it a far better spot? I mean,
yes, it is.
No.
Yes.
Is it without?
Yes.
Is it without Hill?
Yes. Even without Hill, it's still significantly better.
I don't know that it is. You're telling me, look, just because you're telling me that the Kansas City Chiefs offense without Tyreek Hill is going to be exactly this, even 10% worse than it was last year. I think that's a big stretch. You're telling me Sammy Watkins as your number one, and then a mix of Demarcus Robinson and Mecole. Well, I'll let you say his name. The mix of those two, and then of course Travis Kelce. It's just like, what is this offense next year? I know we just saw it go ballistic last year, but no Tyreek Hill, I think, is a bigger factor than people are giving it credit for on paper and projectability. Now, the flip side, look, we're going to obviously disagree on that part. The Damian Williams part of it is he is the guy. There's no question in my mind he is the guy. For as long as he's healthy, or if all of a sudden he has back-to-back games where he goes back to Miami Dolphins version of Damian Williams, he is the guy because we know this. We said it last year when we were picking guys off waivers. We've done it before. Andy Reid goes to his guy, goes to his guy, goes to his guy. The backup guys occasionally mix in. You look at the signing of Hyde and you say, you know what? That's exactly what we wanted to see if you believe in Damian Williams. Somebody who steps in as the can-do-it-all running back if something happens to Damian Williams. He's not a threat to, Carlos Hyde is not the pass-catching guy. So I'm 100% confident that Damian Williams is the guy. As long as he performs like he did last year, that's going to be on him and that's going to be on his offense.
Well, even to your point of, yes, I do think that the Kansas City offense takes probably even a significant, it was going to take a step back anyway, because they weren't going to run at that high efficiency with Tyreek Hill or without Tyreek Hill. It was just coming back to earth a little bit. So even if they're 30% worse, that still makes them significantly better than Arizona. And to piggyback your point about Cleveland, that, hey, maybe we're overrating them a little bit, there's a chance that Arizona is just an absolute disaster under Kingsbury too. That is in the range of outcomes for them.
No, it's certainly in the range of outcomes. I agree with you. There's a good chance Kingsbury doesn't even translate to the NFL. It wouldn't be the first time if somebody, and especially with the 4 wide and 5 wide and the all those offenses. I'm not saying that's out of the realm of possibilities that the Arizona offense, as well as their defense, stinks, and all of a sudden this team is 1-15 next year.
So I would even go through it if we just say, let's take offensive-minded head coaches, and we have Andy Reid versus Kingsbury. Give me Andy Reid.
No, I don't disagree with you there.
So give me the number one passing option in each offense. You can have Larry Fitzgerald versus Travis Kelce.
Christian Kirk versus Larry. So Travis Kelce.
All right. So then you go Sammy Watkins versus Christian Kirk. It's probably as bad as Sammy Watkins can be. It's probably still Sammy Watkins.
All right. I mean, I see where you're going.
It just feels like if you project them have the same role in each other's offense. I agree, talent-wise, David Johnson is better than Damian Williams. But I don't think that his talent is so much better that it overcomes just the lack of offense that Arizona could have versus at least the floor of what we know that Kansas City is going to have.
Well, then it comes down to, as much as I believe Damian Williams is the guy, 100%, I said 100% I believe he is the guy. There's still a percentage. I can still believe he's the guy and still also believe there's a percentage where he fails. Let's be real about Damian Williams' career up until last year. It had been a disappointment. It had been Damian Williams was almost out of the league before last year, and Damian Williams looked terrible with the Miami Dolphins. There's a scenario where he reverts to that guy, and even in the Chiefs offense can't perform. Remember, everybody wanted Darrell Williams in this offense, and he did nothing. So you look at it and I say, maybe he doesn't succeed, whereas even if he's the guy, David Johnson is, even if he's having a bad 2 or 3 games, is not going to stop being the guy with the Cardinals. And that's why I give him the slight edge, despite you are 100% right about the offensive differentials. Different. Well, just screw it. Keep going.
So what you're saying is that you're not sweating Chase Edmonds.
No. And I like Chase Edmonds. I was somebody who was a fan of Chase Edmonds.
Yeah. So but I think that's when you're seeing these early ADPs, maybe this ends up becoming an ADP decision because it really does feel like David Johnson won't go like significantly higher than Damian Williams, but probably like
right now.
You got like at least 8 to 12 picks in between them where Damian Williams is going later. And they're essentially the same with a bit more risk baked into Williams, but it feels like there's more upside baked into Williams too.
No, if this is one of the advocate situations of drafting in May or June, this is why you do it now, is because Damian Williams, if some of the mock drafts I've done, has slipped into the early third round in a couple of them. David Johnson is rarely, if ever, making it out of the first round. So to your point right there, even if you're still even if you're like me, you can go David Johnson, Damian Williams back to back, but David Johnson first. You might as well wait the extra full round and get Damian Williams, for your point, that if he is on the field as the lead guy for all 16 games, probably ends up with better numbers.
Yeah, I might just make this an entire tier 2 itself. That I make tier 2 Gordon, Bell, Connor, Mixon, Cook, Chubb. In tier 3, Williams, David Johnson, and Todd Gurley. It just feels like those guys have question marks that we're going to learn a little bit more about them as it goes along. And then that leaves Josh Jacobs, who you really like, who you would have over all 3 of those guys.
No, I would just have him in that tier. Okay. I actually have,
because there are question marks with him too.
Yes, as of today, I would probably go 50-50. Like 50 of my drafts, I would take in this position of all these guys being off the board. Now we're at the 13th running back. Probably 50% of the time would go Todd Gurley. 50% of the time I'd go Josh Jacobs, because Josh Jacobs is going to be the consistent. He's getting 20 touches per game. You and I ran through it when we talked about the rookies, and I gave you all the examples of that. John Gruden hasn't really ever had a guy like Josh Jacobs, and yet has given people huge amount of works, including Cadillac Williams, who probably actually was in Josh Jacobs' range coming out of college, but had 290 carries as a rookie in 14 games. So I'm not concerned about Josh Jacobs' work. Josh Jacobs just has the concern of David Johnson of the offense, and what is it going to be? And I think that's the downside of Josh Jacobs. So that's why I say it's going to be like, maybe I take Jacobs for some, and then maybe I take Todd Gurley for some.
Well, maybe I'll extend that range then, because I was going to talk about tier 4 with these guys, but everything you just described with Josh Jacobs, the big thing with him is how will he be involved in the passing game? If they get down in games, does he remain a 3-down back, or is Rocket Richard coming in and it's like, hey, we'll play Doug Martin for no apparent reason? Like, you never really know what they're up to over in Oakland, but it's sort of the same case. It's sort of the same case with Marlon Mack too that we talked about, is that you're almost banking on if they get down in games, then Hines is on the field or someone else is on the field. But Indy projects to be far better than the Raiders. That shouldn't Mac be going ahead of them then?
No, because I think Mac comes off the field more than Josh Jacobs does. That being said, that's it. If I'm running this team, I don't draft somebody in the first round with Josh Jacobs' talent and not use him as a 3-down running back, because I see that he can be a 3-down running back. Again, we're not John Gruden. We're not the Raiders. We're not this team. So who knows? It would be shocking, in my opinion, and I know that we throw that term around, but in my opinion, you draft somebody in the first round like Josh Jacobs as a running back in today's NFL, it would be shocking if you don't use him as a 3-down running back. So, but to your point, if they use somebody else, obviously that's going to be a big knock in his value. Don't forget, we need it's not sleeper or fantasy Twitter. We need a hashtag for like I want the unknown guy Twitter, is all these people talking about Chris Warren stealing his passing job and stealing his job in general. Like, shut up. Josh Jacobs is drafted in the first round. He's their lead running back. But there are scenarios where he is a disappointment and is only on the field for 2 downs. And he turns into Derrick Henry. And not similar style running back, but that he is only the 2-down guy.
I'm not sweating Chris Warren. I think I'm sweating Warren from Something About Mary more than Chris Warren. Like, give your head a shake on that one. Next one down, Fournette, Jones, Devonta Freeman. I can't figure out what to do with Fournette. Like, is he much better now that Nick Foles is the quarterback? Like, that's a significant improvement at pivot with Foles over Blake Bortles, but is that going to translate into the passing game at all? Is he just going to be a guy who rushes for 3 yards up the middle every time and you hope that he scores some touchdowns? I can't wrap my mind around it. And it seems like he doesn't want to play half the time. He's constantly banged up. What do I do? I don't know. For me, I can't figure it out.
I don't know if you heard, but Leonard Fournette is in the best shape of his life.
Really? I want to hear the stories about the guys who aren't in the best shape of their life. You never hear about those ones.
No, except Eddie Lacy when that picture leaked. That was like the only one we got when he was like Eddie Lacy on cheeseburger diet. But look, Leonard Fournette, the offense is going to run through him. And with the Nick Foles signing, no matter what, they're still going to go through Leonard Fournette because this is a run-first offense. This is a run-first team. This is the Tom Coughlin way of playing football. And I think that you're looking at somebody who could potentially be a value this year. He's in the third round right now. He's in the middle of the third round. Leonard Fournette is a volume running back. I mean, it's real. You joked and said 3 yards per carry, but people are going to be surprised if you look at his yards per carry being under 4 yards and be like, oh my God, I didn't realize that Leonard Fournette wasn't at least averaging 4.5 for his talent. Part of that probably has to do with the Jaguars offensive line and the Jaguars offense as a whole, because they don't really have a real number one wide receiver. They have a bunch of nice pieces, but you can not stack the box, but you can almost play a congested box against them and be a little bit more risk averse or risk taking in the secondary. So I think that's why that hurts Leonard Fournette. I think he is a decent pass catcher, than more so than people realize, because we say this all the time that LSU still runs an offense from 2001, and they're basically like Tom Coughlin in college. But he's a value if he plays 16 games. It's Leonard Fournette. He's played 2 seasons and hasn't played a full season in either one. I think we're all betting on him getting hurt at some point. And they did draft Raquel Armstead, who's kind of like, you want to like your distaste for Derrick Henry. Raquel Armstead is what Derrick Henry should be. He's a big dude who knows that he needs to run like a big dude. He doesn't try to dance.
So the other thing with Leonard Fournette too is I can see a case to be made for him to move him up a little bit in non-PPR, but if he's just not going to be involved in that way in the offense, and whether he's a good pass catcher or not, it seems to be basically irrelevant. If they just don't pass to him, then you're never going to know. And even to the point of, yeah, they have a bunch of, let's say, less skilled receivers. Is that actually the case? Or do they just have Blake Bortles throwing the ball? And maybe the offense just gets better by osmosis of not having him around anymore.
No, I still don't think they have a true number. But let's not forget, Allen Robinson put up some pretty damn big numbers there. Grant, it was because Bortles created his own garbage time, but it was still Allen Robinson could turn up number one numbers because he was a number one wide receiver. Marquise Lee is not a number one. D.D. Westbrook is not a number one. DJ Chark they drafted last year. You can go down the line. There's not a number one wide receiver on this team. I mean, at best case scenario, you're looking kind of like what the Giants have now, where they have a Shepard and a Tate who should be a number 2 to somebody. So that's why. But your other point stands too. And if you look at what they did in the offseason, it almost is a little bit telling that like Armstead is the backup for Fournette, who we know Armstead's not a pass catcher. And to your point, again, we were kind of connecting dots here, but let's connect the dots and say, look at who else they brought in with Alfred Blue, Thomas Rawls, and Benny Cunningham. Pass catching running backs, pass catching running backs, pass catching running backs.
I would not throw Thomas Rawls into the pass catching running back. My main man Benny C for sure. Like you just list those names off. It just sounds like Benny Cunningham is going to play the old TJ Yeldon role.
And that's the thing. It's like, okay, like if Thomas Rawls, he wasn't really even in my mind anyway, because I don't even think he makes the team. But the point being is they're looking for a timeshare piece. And I think that's, to your point, telling the fact that Leonard Fournette is not going to be somebody who catches 50-plus passes.
So Devonta Freeman, as it's been reported, despite having a knee, groin, and foot injury last season, will be ready for training camp. Full go at training camp.
Is he in the best shape?
I mean, he's in the best shape physically that he's been in some time, because he's not dealing with the dizzies from concussions, and apparently his knee works again. So that's fantastic news. But he's sort of in the same boat as Fournette, is that they're always banged up, but I almost think that without Tevin Coleman around, I'm not really sweating Judge Ito too much, that Freeman might be a better, like if you're in this range and this is where you're drafting running backs and you're looking for upside, I think that Freeman has more upside than Fournette does.
He does, but I mentioned to you in the rookie piece too, don't forget about Kajay Olsen, who's kind of another big body running back.
See, you said don't forget about him, but I already did.
See, so there you go. There's your reminder. Like, the truth is that Devonta Freeman somehow plays even 14 games. He's probably going to be an RB1. It's just, is he? And like, I know that like he's had a ton of time off because of how much time he missed last year on top of the offseason, on top of all of this. He's healthy as of today. Has he changed his running style? That's what I want to know, because he hasn't, and he's not going to. And that's what gets him hurt. It's not even the fact that, like, hey, it's a soft tissue thing like we see with some baseball players or whatever, like, oh, he's blown out his knee 3 times. No, the dude just runs headfirst into everything, and that's why he's got so many concussions. And he said he's not going to stop how he runs because that's what makes him effective. And, so now you roll the dice and say you hope you get him for 14 games. If you do, good. You just got an amazing value, but the truth is, it's like there's no way on earth I'm pairing a Devonta Freeman with a Leonard Fournette or Melvin Gordon or anybody like that on my team.
So I have Freeman and Fournette as a part of this tier 4. So the other names I'm going to throw out to you to see if we should include them into tier 4. I got Sony Michel and Derrick Henry, who I feel like are on a tier by themselves. But I got Aaron Jones, Kerryon Johnson, Kenyon Drake, Phillip Lindsay, and Darius Geis.
2 of those, and then you didn't mention the guy that you hate so much.
No, yeah, you mean Mark Ingram? Worst place, Mark Ingram? Yeah, have fun drafting Mark Ingram. He's a piece of shit.
well, this is going to be the real test.
How about you want to lose? Draft Mark Ingram. Easy.
I was going to say, this is the real test. What do I tell you every year about the Ravens running back, Pat? What have since I've known you, what have I always told you? It's the guy that nobody knows or wants to talk about that's the value for the Ravens every single year. And it's worked like clockwork.
So that means they're going to re-sign Justin Forsett in the offseason? Alanis Forsett?
He was like the second one that started that. You remember that. And then the year everybody drafted Forsett in the second round, he got hurt. And it ended up being, I forget who it was that year, but it's always somebody else. But all right, Mark Ingram aside, I would put Darius Geis in here. Obviously, as of today, it's the assumption that he is 100%. Remember, this is Dalvin Cook.
There have been reports to say that he's going to be ready for training camp. So if he's ready for training camp, he should be ready for the preseason. That means he should be ready for the season. They did re-sign Adrian Peterson, though.
Yes, and exactly. And this is the Dalvin Cook situation, but the point to everything you just said, the reason he should be ready is because he's got a couple months on when Dalvin Cook got hurt later in the year. Darius Geis got hurt before the season even started. So you've got those months on him where, to your point of, if Dalvin Cook was ready by the mid-late season, kind of like week 9, he's got back to 100%. We can hope Darius Geis is near or close to 100% by week 1. And if so, in my opinion, he deserves to be in this conversation because I think he's better than Leonard Fournette, who he replaced in college. And similar to Leonard Fournette, is even a better, at least as good, if not a better pass catcher, who was also overlooked in that facet because of LSU. So I put Darius Geis in that conversation. And, I know you don't like Derrick Henry, but he would be in that group. I don't have a problem if you want to put him on a tier of his own. I'd put Kerryon Johnson in that group, assuming, well, I don't want to say assume because this is a tough thing to assume. If he gets 15 touches at least per week, which he should, and he should get that kind of work.
But now they have the ball stealer, CJA, your boy.
And it's Matt Patricia, and it's Theo Riddick is still there. And I'm sure they've got another 2 or 3 running backs they're looking at that they're going to sign or bring off the street somewhere. And it's Patricia, and it's the Patriots offense, and it's Patriots way. So I don't think I'm going to end up with a lot of Kerryon Johnson because where I've seen him go is he was at the top of this tier of what people were talking about. The people are drafting Kerryon Johnson in like the 3-4 turn.
I think I would it feels like even with Matt LeFleur, the Frenchman in Green Bay, that they got to give the job to Aaron Jones, right? This isn't going to be a split again, is it?
I'm off Aaron Jones because I do think it's split because I think that, look, what we know about Aaron Jones, and I'll continue to say it, people know that I was a Jamal Williams fan, but it was a Jamal Williams fan of the fact that he does everything well, similar to James Jones, who used to play for the Packers, does everything well, nothing exceptional. He's got some really nice moves. He's a very good pass blocker, but he can withstand being that lead guy, being the pass blocker. Aaron Jones is by far the better running back and more explosive, but you just don't want Aaron Jones touching the ball 20 times a game, and you also don't want Aaron Jones trying to stand in there and do blocks for Aaron Rodgers. He has improved in that area a decent amount, and I'll give him credit for that. But at the same time, I think the drafting of Dexter Williams, granted it was the 6th round, but I think the drafting of Dexter Williams tells me, in my opinion, that we want Aaron Jones to stay in that 15-touch range. So similar to Kerryon Johnson, I'd put them in the same bucket.
All right, so I'll go Freeman, Fournette, Geis, and maybe Kenyon Drake. Maybe without Adam Gase around, Drake can finally be unleashed.
Yeah, I'm with you with that. I think we saw Drake last year, although it feels very similar to Lamar Miller. It was like, hey, give the guy more touches, give him more touches. He gets more touches. Oh, it's just the same Lamar Miller, just less efficient.
I can see that too. I mean, Lamar Miller is essentially Frank Gore at this point. Like that, those are the, like, you look back at the end of the year, it's like, hey, Lamar Miller had a pretty decent year. Where did that come from? It's like, oh, he never got hurt. That makes sense.
He played 16 games.
Yeah, so I'll take Kenyon Drake in that spot. So the next tier, that mini tier, I'll have Derrick Henry and Sony Michel. Am I like, since we're talking PPR, where does James White fit into this mix?
I mean, looking at last year, he should be in tier 2. I mean, I
think it's a real question. Like, is James White a part of that Geis, Fournette, Freeman tier just based off his receptions?
He should be, but is he going to see the same use?
Yeah, I mean, I don't see why not. Like, Sex Rex Burkhead, I don't see him doing much. Like, I'd probably still take Freeman. I'd take Fournette. I'd probably take Geis based on the chance that he comes back healthy, the talent is there, and they just run. Like Geis out of all these guys, like if you're trying to find the next guy to break into that 75+% snap range, Geis feels that if the health is there for him, that he could be one of those guys.
Oh, absolutely. And that's what they drafted him to be. And the Adrian Peterson was insurance, and the Bryce Love pick with Bryce Love was the replacement for Chris Thompson next year. And Chris Thompson's still not 100% healthy. Bryce Love probably starts the season on the pup list. So yeah, I so far own, I think, almost 100% Geis. I'm going to have a lot of Geis this year.
So I'll put it James White right behind Geis, but a part of that tier 4, just because I think he's very safe as it pertains to PPR formats. And that means I would take him over Sony Michel. Sony definitely has more upside because of the touchdowns that can come along with it. But let's say we talk about Kansas City taking a step backwards. What if the Patriots offense takes a step backwards? Because that seems reasonable, doesn't it?
It does, and I think that's part of the downside of James White.
I would actually go the other way on that. I think that a bad Patriots offense actually helps James White and hurts Sony Michel.
No, because I was thinking more they take a step back in that kind of effectiveness, and they start leaning more on the receivers a little bit more and leaning on the run a little bit more to keep the ball out of Tom Brady's hand. And if Tom Brady's not throwing, 30 times a game every single week, and it was more of what we saw last year. I mean, yes, James White did that last year. It just, when you're talking about that level of passing game, that's a lot to put on a running back. And that's my concern. And I know he's proven to be, and James White is a major part of the passing offense, but I don't know if I'm going to buy into it happening for another year in a row, because you jokingly dismiss Rex Burkhead. Last year at this time, well, not even this time, once we got to August, everybody was Rex Burkhead was going in the 5th round last year.
As I went back and watched last year's running back show, I was like driving that bus. I didn't have a super successful fantasy year last year, not going to lie to you. Rex Burkhead, not good.
But you weren't the only one. And the reason is because a lot of people thought Rex Burkhead was going to be the man for at least 60-70% of the time. That Sony Michel, when he came back, would cut in a little bit. James White would be like an ancillary piece. But James White has proven to be what James White is. I just don't know that if the offense takes a step back, like it just kind of feels like the touchdown efficiency from the Falcons from a few years ago, the Chiefs from last year, is there's a lot that happens a certain way for James White to have the season he just had.
Yeah, but he doesn't even need to have the season he had last year to end up inside the top 16 of running backs in PPR. You can fall back a little bit and still end up there, especially if the week-to-week passing numbers there. If he even just plays 35% of the snaps in New England, when he's on the field, they pass to him all the time. So I have fewer concerns about James White than you do.
Yeah, and that's where I lean a little bit differently, because I feel like if they're up in games, which they'll be because they are always winning double-digit games, they're up in games, is that when Sony Michel is healthy and at the drafting of Damian Harris, who does everything really well, nothing exceptional. He's another one. He's like a James Jones of running backs right there. You draft Damian Harris, who was, for a lot of people, arguing as being a round 2 talent this year, and you have Sony Michel still. That tells me that Patriots team was already one of the most run-heavy teams last year, is that they're going to go back to it again, especially with the lead this year to keep Tom Brady at the end of his career in his 40s now. That's my only concern. It's like, how much is Tom Brady going to be passing every single week?
So I'm going to go Freeman, Fournette, Geis, White, Drake as a part of that tier. That leaves Henry, Aaron Jones, Sony Michel, Kerryon Johnson. I have Phillip Lindsay as a part of that list too, because can it happen again? He is coming off the wrist injury. A broken wrist is like no joke, but he should be limited OTAs. And then once we get into the preseason, he should be fine by the beginning of the season. Like I'm having almost like Fournette, I'm having a very tough time inserting him in somewhere, because you could really argue that he should be substantially higher.
He definitely can 1,000 yards even with the injury. So I think that's the big concern. Is also, does that go in the back of the Broncos' mind and say, you know what, given his size, similar to Kyler Murray at quarterback, given his body mass and size, like, do we want him touching the ball that much? And do we try to see if Royce Freeman has more than, he showed last year? I mean, that's somebody still that everybody assumed was going to be the lead last year. It was going to be, Brad Evans was driving that bus, and that wasn't to call out Brad Evans. I was high on Royce Freeman too, is the fact that Royce Freeman was supposed to be an RB2 last year. He was supposed to be dominating this backfield and plowing through defenses and everything like that. So I think that's a legitimate concern. With Lindsay comes with a lot of risk, and I think part of it is because we don't know his health. And if healthy, we don't know if the Broncos use him the same way last year after getting that injury. I would put 2 rookies in this group. I would put both David Montgomery and Miles Sanders in this group.
Well, you really sold me on David Montgomery when we did that rookie show. I don't know if I want to take the leap on Miles Sanders as a part of this tier. Montgomery, I can get behind, but with Sanders, I'm not trusting Doug Peterson to have a guy that I just.
Neither do I.
I would rather have Kerryon Johnson. You know what I mean?
But I could see their touches being exactly the same. And just because
I could, but I could see, at least if we're going to be talking, I could see them being exactly the same. I could see Sanders potentially having more. But I feel like when we start swinging the pendulum of upside versus downside, the downside of Miles Sanders could just be, he's their third running back for whatever reason.
See that, and that's where I don't see that downside. As much as I hate Doug Peterson's offense and rail against drafting the running backs, and my biggest thing early on was immediately after the draft. Those are always fun to watch. Those drafts is the mock drafts where people are taking Miles Sanders as like the 15th running back off the board, and that's what started this whole thing. Where I went on a podcast one day and just ranted and raved about, railed against Doug Peterson and taking the running backs there and thinking it's going to be different this year. But if you're taking them in this group, you've eliminated, I think, 95% of the risk. Miles, he's not going to be the third running back unless he just falls on his, like Royce Freeman falls on his face. If he's anything as good as we think, he's not going to be that bad.
Okay, but we thought the same thing with Rashad Penny last year too, as it pertained to Chris Carson. Now Rashad Penny's getting the buzz again. That's going to happen a year or two. But here's what I want to throw out here: that if we compare him to Kerryon Johnson alone, and just say that at the end of the year, which Detroit running back is going to have the most fantasy points? The answer is going to be Kerryon Johnson. Now, that might not be a lot of fantasy points, but he is pretty locked in as the guy who will score the most. With Philadelphia, it could be Darren Sproles. It could be Jordan Howard. I don't know. It's probably Miles Sanders, but I can't commit to that.
I will. I'll commit to it. I'll go on record as saying that. And yes, you bring up the Rashad Penny, but if you know, I just want to throw this out there because I know everybody who remembers me from last year, Rashad Penny guy. If you noticed at the end of the third week of August, because Chris Carson was getting all the touches and Pete Carroll continually said Chris Carson was going to be a guy, I dropped Rashad Penny all the way down. I think he was 37 or 38, which was still too high at the end. But, we have time to find out. I will say this. You're right in the fact that it's a better than zero chance that Miles Sanders does go down the Rashad Penny route as they spend the draft capital and he just does nothing in training camp in the preseason. If that doesn't happen and he's still getting touches and at least performing and he walks into week 1 as the lead, that's where I say I think the floor is Kerryon Johnson as well. I just don't see him falling on his face like Rashad Penny did, because Rashad Penny also got banged up and hurt too.
So the last thing here is there's 2 situations that I'm really monitoring because I want to figure out where these guys go, and they've been sort of omitted from this list because I don't know which one I should be having in. The first one is the San Francisco backfield with Jarrett coming back and then signing Tevin Coleman. And obviously, you still have your Jeff Wilsons, your Matt Breidas, your Kyle Jurgs of the world. Do you have a take on which guy it is? Is it Jarrett?
No, I actually think as of today, this picture's starting to get a little bit clearer, although it could get foggy again by the time we get to August. But as of today, with Breida tearing a pec and McKinnon's apparently still slow to come back from that was a major surgery to have, starting to lean Tevin Coleman, and it's starting to look like, hey, Tevin Coleman back with Shanahan and what everybody thought Tevin Coleman could do on his own when Devontae Freeman got hurt, and he was going to have this huge payday and be the running back du jour in the free agency class of last year. And we saw what happened. And just that was few people lost as much money as Tevin Coleman did from last year to the offseason. But he's with Shanahan and everybody else is hurt right now. And I think that includes Raheem Mostert. It's right now, he's the only guy standing.
Sideshow Raheem. You always got to watch out for Sideshow Raheem. And poor Jarek. The guy was incredibly Andercursed when Cuss called him a top 5 running back last year that he blew out his knee the next day. Very classic Andercurse for the people out there. So before we go on to the next tier, the other situation is that Tampa backfield with Ronald Jones, who was like a disaster as a rookie, and then Peyton Barber, who just remains the last man standing, who I used a bunch on DraftKings last year and was pretty good. You can draft him as your flex running back or your 4th running back, and he could produce for you. He could churn out top 25 numbers.
This is one where I just wish, like, that we're always going to get coach speak. This is one of those times where can we just get the answer? Because there's only two scenarios here. What the Bucks did this offseason, they brought in nobody. They didn't draft anybody. They picked up Bruce Anderson in undrafted free agency. And everybody, like, of course, this is another one of those, like, oh, I know about him. I got the t-shirt before you did. Bruce Anderson, look out for the success and the hit rate of undrafted free agents is exceptionally low. Let's chill out. And granted, at running back, it's usually more than any other position, but still, there's a reason people are undrafted free agents. I was actually a fan of Bruce Anderson. I thought he would be drafted late. But again, let's be real. The Buccaneers basically ignored the position. They brought in the dude from the Arizona Cardinals and then cut him like 3 days later. But if you look at it now, it's either going to be, we drafted Ronald Jones last year. Wasn't the same regime, but we drafted him. Hey, there's talent here. Let's see what we get out of him this year. On the flip side, it could be, well, we saw enough from Peyton Barber last year, and he's the better pass catcher. And if Bruce Arians likes pass catching running backs, we're just going to roll with him, and Ronald Jones is our backup. That's what I'm saying. I wish we knew if Arians liked Jones or Barber, because he's coming in, and we don't have anything with Arians with this team. So that's it's going to be one or the other. I just wish we knew which one.
So if we talk about like specific tiers when it comes down to it, I feel like if we're going to say that Barber and Coleman are at least at this point, and this definitely changes because we got 4 months before the season starts, that we can interchange names as a part of this tier. But I had Sanders, Chris Carson, Lamar Miller, Tevin Coleman, LaShawn McCoy, and Peyton Barber all as part of the same tier.
That's fair. I mean, we already discussed some of the people I'm a little bit higher on, but that's fair.
But like, do we chuck in like the next few names on the list are like Tariq Cohen, Dion Lewis, Rashad Penny, Carlos Hyde, Jordan Howard, Ito Smith, Austin Eckler, like that type of player comes into the mix now.
The only ones I would is Tariq Cohen, definitely. Okay. Just because
PPR.
Even though, yeah, exactly. And this is completely different in non-PPR. It's not even in the discussion. So
I would take Cohen over. I would take Cohen over McCoy. So that's something I would do.
Oh yeah, McCoy barely made it into my top 40, and he might not even be on the roster. I mean, let's be real about the McCoy situation. But the other one is Penny, and I'm not going back to it because of like, I was the Penny guy last year, but it was a complete lost season for the injuries and for his performance. He deserves plenty of it. Like, there's players who get hurt and don't fall out of shape the way he did. And part of that's probably on him and being a rookie and learning. At the same time, Chris Carson's hurt right now. So yes, we're not to training camp yet, but Penny's got the door is not open all the way, but it's pushed, it's creaking a little bit. Like, he could at least make a little bit of noise. And worst case scenario for the team is it's a 50-50 split. That's actually worst case scenario for us as fantasy wise. Best case scenario, he ends up becoming the lead in that backfield. I don't think that's going to happen because I don't think Pete Carroll wants that. I think Pete Carroll, unfortunately, is going to go with a very 50-50 split. Rashad Penny's passing game heavy. Chris Carson is running game heavy. And that's what we're going to be dealing with all year.
So I'll go Sanders, Miller, Coleman, Carson, Barber, Cohen, Dion Lewis, LaShawn McCoy, Rashad Penny, Jerick McKinnon, Jordan Howard as a very confusing tier. And
that's fair.
And that leaves us to the backup. So who is the best, like, if you're going to take like a shot on either a handcuff or someone that can potentially contribute, almost like Dion Lewis is probably the better version of this, or trying to find like the Mark Ingram situation where you have the second running back on a team, but they're still fantasy viable week to week that you could put them in and play. Like Austin Eckler is another one like that. But which running back benefits the most as a backup should the first guy go down? Is it Latavius Murray?
I was just about to say, does he count? That was going to be the first one.
Because I think that he is the best of the backups. It's him and Eckler.
Because I think I don't even call him a backup. I call him what's better than a backup, but not a starter or not a complete timeshare. Like, I think he's going to be in the Mark Ingram role, maybe 90% of it, but that's still enough touches where in most leagues you're starting Latavius Murray every single week. So
you have Murray, you have Eckler. They're completely draftable. And unless you think that Jackson ends up taking over for Eckler, I don't though.
No, I don't either.
So who else is a part of like that group? Is it just those two? And should Dion Lewis be closer to that group than be bunched up in the tier above?
No, I think Dion Lewis deserves to be in this group. I think we'll also have a scheme change. I mean, Dion Lewis might see more work this year. So that's in the conversation. I mentioned the other one that he is purely a backup. But if you want to talk about somebody's value that's going to go through the roof and probably be a mid-level RB2, it's Raekwell Armstead.
I guess Naheem Hines would have to be a part of this group. Maybe.
Because it's full point PPR, yeah.
And I'm just trying to think, like, does Jamal Williams get enough run that he's a part of that tier, or is he on like the next backups down?
I think Dexter Williams takes Jamal Williams' job.
Okay.
I think Dexter Williams is I mean, you talk about the guy, like I said, in the rookie show, explosive, hits the hole and just gone.
Well, here are the other guys that I kind of have written down. So you can tell me who should be included in that tier with Murray and Austin Eckler as backups you can draft. And they not only work as potential viable fill-in pieces during bye weeks or injuries, but can see their role expand too, should there be a devastating injury to the person in front of them. So I got Ito Smith, Jalen Samuels, Wayne Gallman, AP, Chris Thompson, Jamal Williams, Kareem Hunt, Duke Johnson, Donta Foreman, Kalen Ballage, Gio Bernard, Royce Freeman, Theo Riddick, Chase Edmonds, Darrell Henderson, Spencer Ware. Those are the names that I was checking out.
Yeah, I think you pretty much hit on most. I mean, yeah. You say Justice Hill probably sees a big jump if your boy gets hurt in Baltimore.
Yeah, but that could be Gus Edwards too. We don't know.
That's why I said possibly.
Yeah, and if they keep Kenneth Dixon, it won't be Kenneth Dixon, but it could be.
It could be. Yeah, we definitely don't. I don't know that Wayne Gallman's the guy for the Giants. They're still talking about Paul Perkins again.
Oh God, not again. We've been down this road.
It's the Giants, though. You want to talk about this is why it's so freeing not to be a fan anymore.
Yeah, it was. I see in the background you got your Odell Beckham Browns jersey now. It must be nice. Very liberating.
I kind of get that. The one that's off screen is the Lawrence Taylor signed jersey. I couldn't cover that up. I mean, but yes, this is covering up Saquon Barkley. Although I still love Saquon Barkley. Like,
so after Murray and Eckler, is like Jalen Samuels the next best?
No, because that's going to go back to what I was saying earlier. Is as much as I'm not a Benny Snell fan, I don't think Jalen Samuels' role changes if James Conner gets hurt. I think Benny Snell steps in.
Yeah, see, Raquel, it just got updated on my sheet that I'm writing down to Raquel. So I don't know if that bodes well for him. I do love the name Raquel, though.
Raquel,
like, I don't know, Raquel from Vanderpump Rules. That's what I'm looking at here.
I was trying to figure out where, like, yeah.
So it's basically Murray and Eckler. Like, they're sort of by themselves here. What about like Chris Thompson? Like, he's one of those guys. Hines,
if
Thompson,
he's healthy.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, if you're going to tell me he's healthy, then yes, he is also one of these guys that's startable, even without the person in front of him getting hurt.
Anyone else? Ballage? Maybe he's the guy, not Drake?
I mean, that's just a scenario that could pan out anyway. I mean, this is offense that's changing. This is a front office that's changing, or not front of the coaching staff that's changing. I mean, that's just one that, what if Ballage is the lead guy in week one and Drake is just a compliment piece?
Yeah, no, I can completely see that. And that was sort of where I was pensive with Kenyon Drake. It just seems like we have a track record with him. And a lot of people were even pointing to Ballage's like yards per carry last year. I think he had like 30 carries. Well, let's calm down on the old sample size with Kalen Ballage.
I actually think that if they're all healthy, again, we don't know, but if everybody's healthy, I could see it being Tevin Coleman leading that backfield. Jerick McKinnon's kind of in the Tariq Cohen value. I think he runs the ball between the tackles more than Tariq Cohen does, but I think McKinnon could fall into that. You're going to start him most weeks, even if Tevin Coleman is the lead.
Yeah, so I'll put Murray and Eckler by themselves. I'll have Hines and like Theo Riddick and Chris Thompson, assuming his health. We'll learn more about that as it goes forward. I mean, I'll have to dig a bit more into Raquel and see what he's up to. Donta Foreman?
Look, if healthy, nobody's really come back from Achilles injury and been anything close to what they were before. And we're talking about the running back position, which is right up there behind wide receivers. Is like, you just don't want it to happen. So if Donta Foreman can get close, like let's say he's 90% of what he was before the injury. For what he is he's actually in the Anderson, Derrick Henry mold of like, let's just use your power, bowl through people. That's who you need to be. You're not going to be the pass catcher. The Texans have been trying to find somebody to make Lamar Miller not expendable, but push him into the complementary role. And if Donta Foreman is anywhere close to that, I could see this being he's leading the backfield 55%, Lamar Miller's 35%, and then somebody else is just absorbing that 10%. Because don't forget, I'm going to have to look it up. I don't even remember the guy's name off the top of my head that they drafted because I didn't have him on my scouting list for somebody that, like, I had to go look after the fact and find some tape on him. The kid that they drafted who the heck was it? Oh, Cullen Gillespie is they draft. Everybody was saying the same thing on draft day. I wasn't the only one. Everybody's like, who the heck is this guy? But they drafted him, and they drafted Karen Higdon later in the draft too. So they've been trying to find somebody to make Lamar Miller just a complimentary piece.
I mean, I think I'd rather draft Cliff Yablonsky from the old Something Awful page rather than this guy, Zarly Zalapski. Probably an even better one, too. Anyway, that'll do it for running backs. You can check out everything and the tiers that I end up solidifying on, at least at the beginning of June, up on dkplaybook.com. You can find the link in the description and the comment section of this video and podcast, just like Jake and I show, breaking down all of the rookies a bit more in depth. That's why we glossed over the Sanders and the Montgomerys of the world, but we address all positions, dynasty rankings, and redraft rankings of all those players in there. Jake, you're writing for The Athletic. You're on Twitter at AllInKid, the same as the Instagrams. Tell us what you got coming up on the podcast and what you're writing about.
Yeah, the podcast is All in Sports. Just had Marcus Grant on from NFL Network last week. Special guest every single Wednesday. Sports Unsealed Tuesdays and Thursdays. That's the Athletic podcast with Chris Meany and Brad Ziegler. And Draft Kit's coming out for the Athletic. Actually, I've never done this for your listeners. I don't know why I haven't. But the name of the show, All in Sports, the podcast, if you go to theathletic.com/all in sports, it's 30% off. I should probably tell your guys that every single time.
Yeah, fucking seriously, man. We want discount codes.
Yeah, 30% off. There you go. And it's good forever. Like mine doesn't expire.
That's when I get my membership to The Athletic, which I don't have right now because I actually got one for like a trial week so I could read one of your columns and I canceled it right away. I don't like reading other people's thoughts. I like having my own thoughts. That's why I'm so bad.
No. Look, that's very fair in our business. Is because if you read so much other stuff, you're going to get your opinion clouded, or you're going to start steering in a different direction than what your initial. And look, you should be wrong and right on your opinion. You use the information to make better decisions, but that's why it's the same. I'm with you. It's like, it's not that I don't want to listen to podcasts or read other people's work. It's just, I want to formulate my opinion and then go read. And usually by that time, there's no time left to do it.
Although I might have to start like reading other people's stuff and listening to more podcasts and just stealing their stuff. If I'm not like improved by week 4 this year, it's going to be an absolute disaster for me. Anyway, you're
entertaining. I watch you just to be entertained.
Well, that's good. I'm moving my hands around a lot. People like that. People are very ADD. They're like, oh, hand. It's all good. And I yell from time to time too. And I have crazy people on. Not you so much, but other crazy people. If you want to hear more crazy people and see how badly some of my rankings are going to be, there's going to be a lot of football coming out. Plus, I got all the other sports, the entertainment stuff. Subscribe to the Pat Mayo Experience. And if you do that, rate it 5 stars, leave your DraftKings handle in the review, and say something nice about it, you're in a draw for 20 DK bucks. If you smash the like button to this video, leave your DraftKings handle in the comment section and rank your top 5 PPR running backs for 2019, you'll be in a draw for 20 DK bucks as well. Or follow me on Instagram at the PME, heart the photo of this show's post, and leave your DraftKings handle in the comment section. You too will also be in a draw for 20 DK bucks. At least if my picks are bad, I'm giving money back to the people, Jake.
That is true. I don't do that.
See that?
Maybe I should.
I'm so bad I have to pay off the people to come back and continue to listen. But the iTunes draw is actually the easiest one to win. Like 5 people a week do it. So you got a 20% chance to win 20 bucks. Something that takes you 1 minute to do. That's good ROI if you're in that sort of business. But other than that, you can check out the feed, check out all the old shows, and my full work is up on dkplaybook.com. I'm Pat Mayo. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.
Mayo Experience! Experience!